This is the road to war for Phase 3, the final phase of the Blue Hole conflict. This video's intent is to bring everyone up to speed on the campaign rules, the backstory, as well as introduce the new armies. This video is full of spoilers, so if you wanted to watch Phase 1 and 2 of the Blue Hole campaign and or the Archer Sierra series, go for it. We'll be waiting for you right here. Okay, everyone caught up with their various conflicts or just ready to move on? Alright, let's get cracking. This video has been split into 3 parts, the rules, the story, and the armies. Feel free to jump around as needed using the video chapters in the description below. For our campaign, we are using our own system, the Gambit Signum. We are also using BattleTech Alpha Strike for our combat system. The Gambit Signum is a framework to establish a strategic campaign. It is designed to be combat system agnostic, so you can use Gambit Signum to set up a strategic campaign with any wargame, of any era, and of any scale. It also includes modules that you can add or omit from your campaign to further customize your game. The Gambit Signum requires a little bit of adaptation to your selected combat system, but the campaign guide has tips and suggestions to help you with that process. And I have some great news. Gambit Signum version 2.0 has released. And if you had purchased Gambit Signum version 1 from the Game Crafter, then I have even more great news. You can get Gambit Signum 2.0 for free. Simply log back into your account with Game Crafter and download the PDF. For our Patreon supporters of Channel Knights and Notable Nobles, you can get a simplified version of the Gambit Signum that we are using specifically in this Blue Hole campaign. For this video, I don't want to bore you with the details and a complete rundown of all the rules, but I want to give you enough of the information of this campaign system so you can better enjoy the campaign. So let's get into how the Gambit Signum system works. The strategic map is a web or lattice of routes and locations, which are collectively called navigation points. There is a pattern to how routes work. It always goes one route to one location, then one more route to another location. You can never have 2 routes connected together. They are always separated by a location of some sort. Routes are not necessarily roads and highways. They also represent avenues of approach. Therefore, a combat unit must move along these routes to get to locations, and this is what we call tracing a route. Tracing a route is also how support units like artillery and air defense can determine the ranges for their weapon systems. Most locations on Blue Hole are towns, or unique locations such as power plants. However, cities with dense populations and development are represented as a cluster of locations, which are called district locations. A unit can move from one district to any adjacent district, but there are only specific routes in and out of a district when leaving or entering a city. The campaign is divided into sets of 5 turns. Each set is comprised of 4 strategic turns and 1 admin turn. Each strategic turn has a command, action, and combat phase. The admin turn only has a command phase and an action phase. Factions will alternate initiative for strategic turns, with the player with initiative going for the first and third strategic turn, as well as going first for the admin turn. During the command phase, factions will make decisions simultaneously utilizing command staff members, such as Fleet Marshal, Corps of Engineers, and Operation Officers. Once the players have finished making their choices, those choices cannot be changed until the next turn. Once all the command actions have been made, they reveal their choices to their opponent and execute their decisions. Then the factions begin the action phase. During the action phase, the factions will alternate taking actions such as moving, repairing, or transporting units around the map. The faction with initiative for that particular strategic turn will take the first action. In the previous campaign, units could only see units that they were adjacent to. This allowed units to move completely unopposed all the way up to the adjacent navigation point of an opponent's unit. Now in Gambit Signum 2.0, units can see up to 4 navigation points away. And if you wish to move your unit closer to an opponent's unit, you must take an attack action during the combat phase. During the combat phase, the faction who has initiative for that particular strategic turn can declare up to 2 attacks, paying the resource cost and choosing the location that is under attack. Attacks can only be carried out up to 2 navigation points from the attacking unit's current location. If the faction with initiative does not declare any attacks, then the other faction may choose to declare up to 1 attack. For declared attacks, defenders will trace a route up to 3 navigation points or directly adjacent to the attacker's position, whichever is closer or as far as the player wishes to defend. The defender will pay a resource cost depending how far away they wish to defend from the defender's current position. And where the defender chooses to defend, that will be the place of the battle. And depending on where the battle takes place, on a route or a location, the battle will have specific scenarios or specifications. For an admin turn, factions will have unique command staff and decisions that are specifically made during the admin turns, such as diplomats, training officers, and quartermasters. And just like other command phases, the decisions are made simultaneously and cannot be changed until the next admin turn. And just like with strategic turns, the factions will then take their actions in initiative order. But in an admin turn, players cannot declare any attacks. There is no combat phase. The last step of the admin turn is to roll 2d6 and determine which faction will have initiative for the next set of turns. The Gambit Signum comes with optional modules to further customize your campaign. We will include the following modules: Command Staff, Air Defense, Air Superiority with Dogfighting, and Artillery. We will not be implementing naval warfare nor weather effects. Now, BattleTech Alpha Strike has its own set of rules for battlefield support. For battalion level artillery batteries, we will still use BattleTech's battlefield support asset of the Thumper Artillery. However, for regimental HQ units, if that unit is within range of the battle and the player pays the resource cost, then we will use the Gambit Signum's artillery, which requires bracketing fire, but it is better at aerial denial and area suppression. BattleTech also has rules for dogfighting aerospace assets, and I personally like them, but the players wanted to quickly resolve what was happening in the air so they could focus on what was happening on the ground. This choice was made simply due to time constraints for the players, so the compromise was to utilize Gambit Signum's air superiority rules with dogfighting. And speaking of time constraints, to help move the battle along, we will activate units based on their element, which activates all the subordinate units within that element. So for example, if a company is activated, then all 3 lances of that company will then activate. Also, to add more variability in combat, we will use multiple attack rolls for determining damage. There are many ways to do multiple attack rolls, but we're using the pilot die system, and this is how it works. When an attack is made, players will build a pool of dice. 1 die represents the skill die. The player then adds 1 additional d6 for each point of damage. In this example, the Orion has 5 damage at medium range. Therefore, the player's dice pool would have 6 dice. 1 is a skill die, and the other 5 dice represent 1 point of damage each. Once the dice are rolled, the damage dice are then paired with a skill die to see if that particular point of damage hit or missed. For lucky points that allow rerolls, only the skill die or any number of the attack dice can be rerolled per lucky point, but not both types of dice. At the onset of Phase 3, the 2 factions were in a state of ceasefire. One side will need to break the ceasefire, and that side that breaks the ceasefire will receive an initial advantage of additional actions during their first set of turns. There are 2 ways to win this war. The player who breaks the ceasefire will be able to secretly select their path to victory. The other player will automatically be assigned the other path to victory, but will not be told what it is until turn 20. The players will likely figure it out before then, but I will not confirm their belief until turn 20. However, breaking the ceasefire has a political cost in morale, utilizing the optional rule for morale in Gambit Signum. The player who chooses to break the ceasefire will lose 1d6 victory points each admin turn. If a player reaches -20 victory points, their benefactor will force a surrender. If a player ever reaches 30 victory points, then they would have won the war. The first path to victory is through capturing the enemy's capital city district. Once they do, they will earn 2d6 of victory points per strategic turn. Once they have enough victory points, then the other side has lost the will to fight and will be forced to surrender with negotiated terms. Another method of victory is to cause the enemy to lose support from their benefactors. There are 31 city districts spread across 8 major cities on Bluehole. Once a player controls 11 or more city districts, then each admin turn, the player will roll 1d6 for each district over the 10 city district threshold. The player will earn victory points equal to the aggregated rolled results of the d6s. Currently, the league controls 20 city districts. House Corbin only controls 7 city districts, and 4 city districts are neutral and can either be wooed over by diplomats or conquered by force. Alright, that's enough of these rules. As the campaign progresses, I'll explain any other quirky rules that we come across. Now what follows is based on BattleTech's lore. but it is not canon. This was just the story that was cooked up through gaming sessions and interpretations of characters that CGL had created. The campaign originally began as a MechWarrior Destiny RPG session, in which the players were representing opposing factions trying to annex the planet of Bluehole. So to get the full picture of the conflict, we need to start 8 months before the first battle occurred and take a look at the factions, starting with Vesper Marches. With the fall of the occupation zone, Duke Vedette Brewer was able to cobble together an alliance of nobles on the planet of Militia that eventually became a government of the Vesper Marches. To be honest, this guy ought to be dead at the hands of some political assassin. Being that he's not is a testament of his charisma, ambition, and willingness to backstab anyone to secure his own future. Once the Archon of the Lyran Commonwealth, Duke Brewer is now the leader of Vesper Marches, mainly because he happens to be the commander of the Hesperus Guards, an elite combat force. Having the largest and best trained army makes it hard to argue or go against his will, but he must still commit himself to a dangerous balancing act, playing nobles off one another in order to stay in charge. We interpreted this character as being interested in expanding the Vesper Marches only as a means to protect the capital world of Militia from direct invasion. However, that was only for external threats. For internal threats, his paranoia grows. This is where our player characters of House Corbin enter the story. Baron Bishop Corbin and his right-hand man, Count Michael Grimes. The Baron is also a charismatic leader who is motivated in altruistic goals but lacks any experience in leadership, especially military affairs. However, his popularity grows, and this is perceived as dangerous by Duke Brewer, who saw Corbin as a potential political usurper. Now, the Duke could easily have had the Baron assassinated, but that takes care of only one uppity noble. However, if the Duke could make an example out of the Baron of what happens to overly ambitious nobles, that would take care of future uppity nobles. The Duke waited for an opportunity, a way to set the Baron up for a spectacular failure. Around this time, nobles within the Vesper Marches began to voice concerns about the Alyina Mercantile League openly getting involved into the politics on Bluehole. Several nobles, including the exceedingly annoying Baron of House Corbin, were urging the deployment of the Hesperus Guards to Bluehole and save Bluehole from falling back into clan-controlled space. This vexed the Duke greatly. Using the Hesperus Guards against the defenseless worlds is one thing, but deploying his personal army into direct conflict with the Alyina Mercantile League would be costly in both material and personnel. The Duke would be victorious, no doubt, but his army would be exhausted and for a time weakened from the war, which meant the Duke would be vulnerable, which is never acceptable to the Duke. But what if House Corbin went instead? To remove the Baron as a political threat, while at the same time appearing magnanimous, Duke Brewer supported the poorly trained yet enthusiastic expeditionary force of House Corbin with transportation and rudimentary logistics. The Alyina Mercantile League had already sent envoys and a small mercenary security force to Bluehole with hopes of peacefully annexing the world. The Duke convinced the Baron to go to Bluehole and offer an alternative solution for their future, one with the Vesper Marches. If the Baron was successful, Baron Corbin would be given the position of royal governor over the planet. In the Duke's mind, it was a win-win situation. If Baron Corbin is successful, then Duke Brewer looks like the hero for supporting a lesser noble to achieve greatness. Baron Corbin would no longer be on Militia and would instead be a human shield on Bluehole against any possible future aggression from the League. But if House Corbin failed, the Duke would abandon the Baron and his army to their demise and make peace with the League. To the nobles of Militia, the message would be clear. The Duke is the leader, and to question his rule would lead to your own demise. Let's take a look at the Alyina Mercantile League, which is led by the former Jade Falcon's merchant caste leader, Marina the Ascendant, the Merchant Queen. Her government is trying to tear down the clan caste system, while at the same time focus on developing a vibrant economy and trade. Her hope is that the League would eventually become a vital economic hub, one that can be tolerated by other great powers. Who knows? Maybe they'll re-establish the HPG networks and become irreplaceable to the Ill Clan themselves. She personally disdains the warrior caste of the Jade Falcons, but she can see their importance to security. Therefore, she allowed the re-establishment of clan warriors, but at the same time gathers together a collection of mercenary units to defend the aspirations and borders of the League. Bluehole has always been a major source of fresh water since the first day was colonized back in the 2750s. The access to fresh water is a commodity that the League would like to secure for both its own use as well as an exported tradable item. Therefore, the Syndic desperately wants Blue Hole to be annexed into the League, but wars and conflicts cost resources. She would much rather acquire the world through peace rather than buy a sword. In steps our player characters, Ambassador Natalie Insworth and her assigned military protection, the mercenary unit of Jefes Chupacabras, commanded by Marcus Gavros, the Jefe. The ambassador's mission was to establish a framework for negotiating a referendum in which the population of Blue Hole would vote to either join the League or remain independent. However, the ambassador was also organizing political groups within the populace to influence the election in favor of annexation to the League. And you know what? Things were going smooth until bandits arrived on the planet. A group of pirates landed at Cobalton Power Plant, overpowering the local security forces and hijacked the station. The Jefe wanted to immediately retaliate and go in guns blazing. However, the ambassador was concerned the power plant would be damaged and upset the fragile peace on Blue Hole. So instead, there was a standoff with the pirates, holding the station and the chupacabras surrounding the power plant. The ambassador entered into a lengthy negotiation trying to convince the pirates to not steal the fusion core, and instead join the League as part of its ever-growing mercenary military force. The negotiations lasted for nearly a month, while the pirates, in frustration, kept cutting power to the cities of Cobalton and Blue Shore. This is when House Corbin showed up in orbit, and without missing a beat, immediately deployed to the power plant and destroyed the pirates. Unfortunately, his forces also partially damaged the power plant in the attack. You know, in hindsight, destroying important economic features is sort of what the Baron is known for. Despite this, the attack boosted the reputation of the Baron amongst the citizens of Blue Shore, Cobalton, and South Azure. He was a man of action, not like the ambassador who hid behind her mercenaries. The next few months, with the date of the referendum quickly approaching, the politics of the world evolved into a choice between Vesper Marches, who gets things done, and the League, who smelled like Clan Jade Falcons. To add fuel to the political fires on Blue Hole, Vesper Marches claimed that House Corbin was the rightful heir due to his great-great-grandfather being the distant cousin of some Lyran official who once held some sort of political position on the planet prior to the clan's invasion, or something like that. Anyway, that was the premise of the Baron's opposition to the League's influence on the world. Finally, the referendum took place and the world was split into 3 camps. The League had the majority of votes in the capital city and the cities of Reston and Azul Harbor. In Indigoville, the League won the majority, but with a razor-thin margin of victory. Sapphire Bay was the only city that voted for independence, though the populace was politically leaning towards Vesper Marches, but not necessarily in favor of House Corbin. Cobalton and South Azure voted for House Corbin, with barely 9% of the populace preferring independence and 12% voting for the League. The League had the majority of the planet's population on their side, technically, but House Corbin demanded a recount in Sapphire Bay and Indigoville. But the League ignored his pleas and simply stated that democracy chose the League and suggested that he leave the planet. But when one of the League's political transition teams arrived in the city of Blue Shore, protests broke out that eventually became riots. It is widely believed that agents of House Corbin instigated the riots, which of course the Baron denies. To protect the League officials in Blue Shore, the Chupacabras were deployed to the city. House Corbin used the deployment as justification to mobilize his forces and march on Blue Shore in order to protect his loyal subjects. And that is where the first episode of Phase 1 begins, with House Corbin's forces advancing on Blue Shore while the Chupacabras are evacuating the city. Phase 1 of the conflict is best categorized as the League trying to avoid a direct battle while landing cheap shots at House Corbin's logistics, whereas House Corbin was looking for ways to land a knockout punch and believing they finally landed one with the Battle of Frigid Cape. Phase 2 was about the League receiving their reinforcements first and immediately pouncing on South Azure, catching House Corbin by surprise. However, using heavy-handed scorch earth tactics, House Corbin was able to weaken the League's hold on South Azure and was able to liberate the city. This is when the greater powers intervened and forced a ceasefire between the two belligerents. At this point, I want to talk about Archer Sierra. In the last episode of Archer Sierra, I told you that if the players were sensible, then Pinkerton Defense, doing business as Jefes Chupacabras, would have surrendered on Archer Sierra. Well, that is what happened. Mostly. You see, they tried to capture the spy, but she wasn't born yesterday. She had been monitoring the communications and signal traffic. She had known that the Chupacabras had been surrounded and were planning to surrender. Long story short, she eluded capture, detonated the starport, and then disappeared in the labyrinth of mining shafts all across the abandoned asteroid. At first, everyone thought she boarded a ship and escaped back to the League's controlled space. However, a few days later, the commander of Pinkerton Defense suddenly died of mysterious causes. Some think it was just coincidence. Some believe it was the spy. But Archer Sierra is a mining asteroid full of abandoned mines and ghost town settlements. She could be hiding there. Or maybe she's on roadside. Or maybe she's chilling on Alyina. Or maybe she's right behind you. Boo. Anyway, the Top Hat was technically the winner of Archer Sierra campaign, so that means Vesper Marches has the advantage on Blue Hole. The various nobles of the Vesper Marches began to openly support an all-out war against Alyina Mercantile League. Pressure was mounting on Duke Brewer to deploy his precious Hesperus guards, something he did not want to do. Total war with the League meant the Duke's position of power could become vulnerable to an ambitious noble of the Vesper Marches. So instead, the reluctant Duke, still trying to appear magnanimous, while also trying to deplete the resources of his potential political rivals, organized a military support package of personnel and equipment to be plucked from various noble houses within the Vesper Marches. These forces would then be transferred to House Corbin to bolster his military position. House Corbin's army swelled from 1 battalion of wannabe heroes into 13 battalions of veteran warriors. Alright, I think that's enough of the backstory for now. Let's take a quick look at the armies on Blue Hole. The League and House Corbin have been very busy during the ceasefire. Both sides have been building fortifications, repairing infrastructure, and most importantly, recruiting and training armies. The armies on both sides have swelled from approximately 1 battalion to 3 regiments on each side, with each player taking command of 1 regiment. Battles will be conducted at the battalion level of these regiments. In total, both factions roughly have 13 battalions each. Originally, I was going to introduce all the Patreon units in this video, but I felt that would not give the proper respect to the Patreon members if I did a quick rundown here. Instead, when a Patreon unit will hit the field for the first time in a battle, I will introduce their units at that time. However, on our Patreon site, we have the complete army list for every single battalion being deployed into the conflict. For each battalion with a Patreon unit attached, we added a short bio and background of that unit for your enjoyment. You know, it's fascinating how players take different approaches to the homework of designing an army. The League players decided on what capabilities they believe they would need for this conflict. Then they divvied out those concepts to each player, who then built their army to meet those identified needs. They developed the Provisional Guard, the 1st Galaxy, and Hefe's Chupacabra mercenary unit. The Alyina Mercantile League's militia was developed using the clan methods of organization. With this in mind, the 1st Galaxy utilizes the tactical formation of stars and clusters. The Provisional Guard is a hybrid of inner sphere and clan organization, so it is a mix of star and lance formations. Let's have a look at the League's forces. The Provisional Guard is the military force that is destined to remain garrisoned on Blue Hole. Therefore, its basic concept is to dominate in the defense of urban and town locations. The standard battalion of the Provisional Guard is comprised of 1 mech trinary and 1 armored vehicle trinary, with a company of assault infantry, 1 command star, and a VTOL attack wing. Stationed at each capital district of the Lapis capital city, Reston, Azul Harbor, and Indigoville, the Provisional Guard has the urban security companies. Those are comprised of 1 lance of urban mechs, 1 lance of wheeled scouts, and 1 lance of deputy infantry fighting vehicles. Alyina Mercantile League, in response to the military buildup of the combined forces of the Vesper Marches, has deployed their 1st Galaxy to the Blue Hole Theater. The 1st Galaxy is designed to be most effective in wide open areas and as the tip of the spear for aggressive offensive operations. The standard cluster of this galaxy is comprised of 2 mech trinaries, 1 armored vehicle trinary, with 1 command star, 1 ad hoc star, and 1 star of elemental infantry. The Chupacabra battalions are the largest formations deployed on Blue Hole. It is designed around the concept of combat flexibility for both offensive and defensive operations. It has a standard structure, but most of its mech companies are unique in their composition. A Chupacabra battalion has 2 mech companies, 1 armored company, 1 attached Patreon company, 2 mechanized infantry companies, a Force Recon Lance, and additional attached specialized Patreon combat lances. Whereas the League players made their armies separately based on fulfilling niche capabilities, the House Corbin players, on the other hand, went to the local coffee shop with their laptops and nerded out crafting an army that the Vesper Marches would have deployed. They went for a similar approach, in which each regiment would be a jack of all trades. They developed 2 types of battalions, the Regal Battalion and the Armored Battalion. Regal battalions have the best troops of House Corbin, including the Patreon forces. Each Regal battalion has 2 mech companies, 1 Patreon company, 2 infantry companies, 1 wing of swift attack VTOLs, and at least 1 attached Patreon lance for special missions and recon. The armored battalions have decent forces, but none of the Patreon units. It has 2 mech companies, 1 armored company, 2 infantry companies, 1 swift attack VTOL wing, and 1 lance of hover vehicles for reconnaissance. All of House Corbin's Patreon forces have been concentrated in the 1st and 2nd Regiment. Each regiment has 4 battalions, with the exception of the 3rd Regiment, which is personally commanded by the Baron. His regiment has 5 battalions, with the 5th being comprised of his House Guard. Let's have a look at the changes in the player characters. The players from Archer Sierra have come aboard this campaign, taking up new characters and making this a campaign of 3 versus 3. The League's new player left behind his career at Pinkerton Defense and took on the new character of Felix Marcel, commander of the League's 1st Galaxy. Ambassador Innsworth has been promoted to the League's Viceroy, having full authority to carry out the Syndic's desire for Bluehole's future. Remember this guy? Well, he was an NPC from the RPG sessions back when this whole thing started. Mr. Smiles-A-Lot was assigned to become the Viceroy's diplomat and political attaché, tasked with winning over the hearts and minds of the citizens of Bluehole. House Corbin is also welcoming a new player, who showed up wearing a top hat. The player was impressed with a character created by one of the notable nobles of the channel, Heiress Agnes von Beringen, or Madame B as the players lovingly refer to her as. The heiress, apparently against her family's wishes, stole away from House Beringen of the Vesper Marches, bringing along a contingent of her own house guards. For her official story, she claims she was inspired by the Baron's efforts to wrestle Bluehole from the clutches of the vile clans. It wasn't long before a courtship between the 2 characters began. Nice little romantic fan fiction material right there, I guess. However, the truth is, the heiress did not run away. House Beringen sent their daughter to support House Corbin in order to obtain economic concessions through alliance or marriage with the Baron of House Corbin. Their true intentions are still unknown, but there is suspicion that the House Beringen, like so many other noble houses of the Vesper Marches, is trying to erode the support for Duke Brewer and weaken his position of privilege and power over the Vesper Marches. Anyway, the player liked the character's backstory so much that he asked the notable noble to allow the heiress to become his character, and Alex agreed. The heiress, likely due to her relationship with the Baron, has been given the command of House Corbin's 1st Regiment. Now remember, just like the Baron and his forces, none of the Patreon forces are originally from Bluehole. They are all foreigners to this world. But the Baron, in order to show his appreciation and further gain loyalty of the Patreon units, has been doling out lofty noble titles of peerage and ownership of lands and assets of Bluehole that the Baron himself does not even control. Okay, the stage is set. House Corbin will have the option to break the ceasefire first, or let the League break it. Leave in the comments what you think House Corbin should do and why. Thanks for watching. The conflict has already started. I am just letting the players get a little further ahead in the game before the first narrative battle report is released, which will be real soon. Alright, we'll see you at the next battle report.